And we are recording. So hi, for anyone that doesn't know, I think everybody knows me, but I am Bernoza Praxilatarina, and I'm incredibly well known for my attention to detail, dainty things, and beige. No, not at all. Actually, I'm not. I'm Prax. I'm really well known for liking things a little bit, well, a lot over the top. Current project involves making, 12 feet platform shoes and a large hat so that I can be 7 feet tall. So that's just kind of how I like things. As we see here, Appliqued Gonfalons, because Magis es Melius, more is better. While I very much think that the flowy, beautiful silk standards are lovely, I would like to add some fringe and maybe some sparkle. And so I really like the Gonfalon style. So we're going to be going through that today. We're going to start with, what is a Gonfalon? Gonfalons are heraldic banners. They hang from a crossbar. So you've got the crossbar on top. We'll have some pictures in a minute. And then it hangs down, and you can have a variety of shapes. We'll also be going through those shapes. The word itself comes from Gonfalon, which means neighborhood. Frequently, these were standards for areas. You'll often see them in ecclesiastical circumstances. In Italy, a lot, they have neighborhood fraternities that carry their processional flag. And so basically what this is a large flag, large banner that says, this is us. It allows you to gather around it. It lets you march in a parade with it. Some guy's holding it, and it's right there with you. And that's one of those things about it. It's right there with you. It's a marching banner rather than a flying banner. It's intended to be in the same space as people rather than 20 feet up in the air. So it allows it to be more detailed than something that you only see far away. It also remains flat. This thing does not fly and flap. They are heavy. Tassel and fringe adds extra weight. They're often made out of canvas or velvet or damasks and jacquards. They're made out of heavy fabrics. They're intended to be weighted and to just hang down. So this right here is the heraldic charge that is a gonfalon. So not only can you make yourself a banner, you can have a picture of the banner on your banner if you chose to register a gonfalon, which amuses the heck out of me because I'm that kind of weird herald. As you can see here, the actual representation of the gonfalon as a heraldic charge, as it would have been in period, has 3 streamers, but there are other options. You can have swallowtails, rectangular, it can be pointed, you can make it lots of different shapes. Here's a few of these. So again, you can have a point, you can have a swallowtail, it can be crenellated, you can make the bottom rayony, you can hang wind chimes from it, whatever you want to do. It kind of feels like a party. We're going to go through some period examples again, because that's how I roll. A lot of these are going to be painted because the exceptional paintings were some of the ones that were saved. So this first one here, it looks just like a painting because that's what they did. But this was a processional banner. They put it on a stick and they hauled it with a parade. This is the Gonfalon of San Bernardino. It's dated 1465. You can see how incredibly detailed this banner can be. If you're going to applique it, you probably aren't going to start out with it being quite that detailed. You well may make it applique and then paint on what you've appliqued. But we'll get to that in a minute. This one here, I put in, well, because it's a griffin. This is a 16th century Italian processional banner. It is painted, but it does have fringe. That's another extant survivor. This one here is from 1516. It's either a French or an Italian banner. It's at the Met. The picture at the Met is only available in black and white, so we have the black and white. It's red. But you can see how heavily embroidered and appliqued this is. This is an ecclesiastical one, because that is quite frequently where you will see these, at least the survivors, because while they were used for regional heraldry and individual heraldry, as we all know, the church tends to keep track of their textiles a little bit better than other places. So we'll see a few more of those. All right, let's see here. Here's some more extant ones. This is a 16th century Italian one to your left, where you have a heavily embroidered center that then has applique around it. The one over to your right is Polish. It's also 16th century. That one is an actual heraldic charges, and it's appliqued on this gorgeous pattern fabric.
Prax, you showed some of these ones. You can kind of see the fabric type. The paintings, were those on canvas, like a canvas painting that was hung up?
Some of them are on canvas, some of them are on linen, some of them are on silk. They range all over the place. So you have a lot of different options. Excuse me? Okay. They range all over the place. We can go back and look at a few of them. Some of them you can't see, but yeah, you'll see them on linen canvas. You'll see them on patterned silks. You'll see them on plain silks. You'll see them on, like this one here, the Italian is velvet. So it sort of depends on what they have. Also, the way heraldic painters tended to be is it's a mix and match. So you have people in basically the heraldry office whose job it is to make like horse trappings and banners and things like that, and some of them have to be done quickly, and in those cases they are more apt to be painted than appliqued, and they are often on canvas and those sorts of fabrics. It sort of depends on what the use is. So the big ecclesiastical processional banners are more often on the very expensive textiles, where one that, hey, we're making this for this particular occasion and we're going to use, these two people are meeting, and so we want this particular heraldry showing. That'll be more quick, and it will tend to be on a different sort of textile. Let's see. Yeah, I'm hearing the feedback too. Does anybody, let's see. Okay, let's see where next we are. Let's see if it's me or what's going on with that. Very well could be me. All right, these again aren't, oops, go back. These are 12th to 13th century German. They're not the best pictures. I'm still trying to find better pictures. But they are they are appliqued and embroidered. And I don't have a lot of information on them. I'm trying to track down more, but just to point out that there are surviving examples of 12th and 13th century German. I have a few different things throughout here. I tried to pick some from different cultures. There are a few that are a little bit out of period so that I could give you a mix to basically show that these are used by a variety of cultures. If this is not a, hey, I'm 16th century Italian, I can use this. These are used throughout period. I mean, not super, super early, but you are seeing them through the medieval period into the early modern. All right, and this is one of those laters. It's 1685, and you get just the motto, but it's on linen, but then it has metallic threads and metallic fringe, which I thought was one reason to pointed out that it has that mix of materials. So once again, you can kind of do what you want to do, and there are various options for shape. This one's a silk. Believe this one is also German, and you get like a variety of all the way around local, basically the local nobles and the whole thing. This one here is painted. I included it because it was Turkish. It's also a little out of period, but it's 1683, and it is a Turkish banner. This one's Russian. I like this one really well because the streamers are decorative. They did not leave well enough alone. They added extra, and then a little more because more. This one is late 16th. It is Swedish Polish. That combination is because King Sigismund was king of both Sweden and Poland simultaneously. So this is his heraldry. This is his banner. It's appliqued on silk with metal threads. And again, you're going to get extreme examples will be what is kept. So for instance, this is a painted banner. It's obviously been kept because it has this gorgeous portrait, but it was created as a processional banner. These are modern. They're currently the type that you see in Italy, but you can see how they have similarities to the period ones. And I tend to make this sort of style where the central charge, I like the three streamers. I like them not being even. I like the point. I just think that this is a gorgeous banner, which is probably the reason that this is the type that you tend to see modernly, because it's such a beautiful style where you have your tabs up top, it's hanging on the crossbar. You've got your large pole for someone to hold it or stick it in a corner. You have your tassels, you have your fringe, and then, a little bit extra because we got to add a little bit more filigree and some more sparkle, because why not? Okay, here is another one. I put this one in because it is much more what we're looking to do. It is an applique banner. This is 14th century Savoyan, the doubloon heraldry. It has gold cording couched around velvet. The velvet has been applied on top, and then we have couched gold worked around all the velvet, and it's heraldic, and it has a cool nifty bottom part, and it has some fringe. So it's kind of got all the things we're looking for. This one I put in here just because, again, I wanted to show non-Western European. This is smaller. It's more of like a tab for hanging rather than being a full-on banner, but you can kind of see that imagery translated. And this is linen on linen. It's 12th century Mamluk. This is, again, an out of period one. It's between 16 and 1650. I included it because, one, it's just, the imagery is fabulous. 2, because it is appliqued, but then it is painted on the applique, and that is really easy to see. So they've got the large bit where the skull is, but then they've gone in and painted the details in. So you don't have to do one technique, and you can applique and then add more, and you end up with a lovely piece. And this is satin appliqued on velvet with cording and paint. This one I include just because I love the patchwork. It was found pretty recently, and it's patchwork with the angevin arms and applique. So we have the patchwork is done here in these strips, and then the fleur-de-lis and the labels are appliqued, and then the whole piece is patched together. So it's just an interesting, oops. Okay, here's another 13th and 14th century Egyptian. It's linen with metal wrapped thread and silk, and you can see the applique here. This is the close-up on the bottom tabs. Again, this is probably a hanging rather than a gonfalon, but again, I wanted to show you how you could translate the imagery to a piece that would still work with the gonfalon. This is 16th century German. It's not particularly easy to see because it is somebody's picture, but you can see the heraldic double-headed eagle, and then there's the heraldry within it. You've got the flames and prettiness, and then you can see here that it's been appliqued and embroidered, and you can see the cording along the edge. And we'll talk about that. Okay, are there any questions so far? Other than where the heck did you find those pictures, Prax? And I have a list, and if you want any of the references, please let me know, and I'm happy to give you full references. A lot of them are from the Met, just because, as we were talking earlier, Creative Commons, and the Met has free use of their images, so they're the easiest to get a hold of and to use without me having to worry about copyright. Plus, they have a fabulous textile collection, and I live there when I'm looking at lace and model books. So I'm there anyway, and those tend to be the images I use. Okay, so designing your gonfalon. As we saw, you can do a lot of different things. You can put pictures of you could paint pictures of the members of your household. You could put your heraldic badges on it. You could put your favorite saint on it if you felt like doing that. You can put your whole heraldic achievement on that. So these are options. These particular here are mine because I have access to my heraldry easily. These are my two badges, the flying pig and the inverted Zieblatt. So I could use either one of those. I could use them in combination. I could put them however I want to together. This is my achievement. And this is one of those great places where you can put your whole achievement, because a lot of it's really rare that you display that whole thing. But again, because this is a marching processional banner, it is with the individual. So if you're going to say, hey, this is me, a gonfalon is a fabulous way to do that. And therefore, putting your whole achievement on it is certainly something you could do. As opposed to like a flying banner, which it's rare you see your heraldry as is, and you never, they don't put the achievements on them, but it is something that happens in this particular style. So if I felt like it, I could take my whole achievement, I could plop it in the center of a banner, I could draw some filigree around it, I could make my torso and mantling gigantic, and I would have that whole thing. But today, my plan is I want to make a new household banner. So this is Patience in Mind, our heraldry for the House of Snake and Stone. So this is a badge. So I can put it on, and it's a fieldless badge, so I can put it on anything I dang well please color-wise. But this is my plan. So because I know this is my plan, and I know there's a lot of rays, there's a lot of wiggle, 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 there's a lot of busy. So because that is my plan, that is going to inform how I do my design. In this case, that means that one, I'm going to use less busy fabrics so that this will actually show. I also know that I want to do a lot of heavy green diapering into the gold for the Gorgon head. So that's where I want all of my extra to be is right in there. So that's what I will be doing, and that means how I pick my fabrics has to do with that. So I'm going to stop sharing just for a second. Okay. So just for a second, what I'm going to talk to you about is the fabrics I'm using for this, just so that you can see what I personally am doing. Okay, as I said, this can go, mine is a heraldic badge, and it is fieldless, so it can go on whatever the heck I dang well please. I am going to use, uh-oh, my internet connection's unstable. Let me know if I drop, and I'll go back. Okay, so this is a silver cotton velveteen. I am planning to use this as my base fabric, which is great because it's highly stable. It's really pretty. It has some nice depth to it, but it's not crazy, and it has a good solid weight to it. So I'm not going to have to, for instance, stabilize it or do anything that way. Because a Gonfalon is down, and right there, you do have to back it. You have two choices. You can either back it, you can make two of your banner, slap them together, and it's front and back, and you can do a 360 around it, which is what I recommend. And because it's nice. If you never plan to display your banner anywhere other than hung on a wall, you might want to save yourself some trouble and some time and just put a front on it and then put a plain backing on it. But especially because you'll be appliquing, and so there will be some stitches coming through the back. You're going to want to make it two-sided, and you also need the extra body for any tassels or fringe you're going to have. Let's see here. So this is my base fabric, and I've chosen it because it's easy and I'm lazy. Next up, if we remember my piece, it has the green sun, I'm sorry, it has the blue sun. And I have a couple of options with that. I've been thinking about it. I have this here, it's a blue corduroy, and I have a blue velvet. I'm probably gonna use the velvet just because I like it. I think it's pretty. It's, you know, obviously got a bit of fuzz and dust on it, but I got a lint roller, I can fix that. I thought about this one, and the reason I pulled it out is because I wanted to demonstrate one great thing about the fact that you are working in layers is that you can work in textures as well. Probably not best of visions, but imagine velvet with corduroy on top, and the fact that they're going to catch the light differently. They're going to have some difference that way. That's one of those things you want to think about when you're making an applique textile. You want to kind of play with things like texture. You want to deal with stuff like your satin or your matte or a shiny bit. One, so that you are aware of what's happening with that and you can control it. So for instance, as I said, I know that I'm going to do some diapering within the snakes. So, and I want that to be the focus. So I don't want, for instance, my blue to be like a shiny satiny blue, because in my mind that will take away the focus from where I want it. So that's something to keep in mind. It's also nice to deal with texture because you're going to be dealing with depth. Whereas if you're painting something, you're not getting dimensional, but because you're appliquing, the layers of your heraldry are going to be actual layers, one on top of each other. If you're going to embroider on it, that's going to add an additional layer out, which is another reason to consider what you're using for your base, making sure that it has enough body. I've done these on silk. If I'm going to do a silk, even if I'm doing silk taffeta, I am still going to add an additional layer. The last one I did, what I did was I had 2 layers of silk taffeta and I had a layer of linen between them. And that worked quite nicely. They stabilized just fine. You can also, use iron on interfacing, and we'll talk about materials in a minute as far as the applique itself. And I keep wanting to go in advanced slides, even though I'm not currently sharing. All right, so I'm going to be using apparently 2 layers of velvet. So because of that, I decided for my next fabric to continue with the velvet. Now, this is the plainest gold you will ever see me use. It's almost more tan. It's kind of sad. It is velvet. It's nice cotton velvet, but it sort of makes me sad because the color just doesn't pop. And I love yellows and I love oranges, so I want things to pop. But again, Patience likes the snakes to be green, and that is not how they are registered. So they need to be diapered in the green. So my plan is I'm going to go through and paint, probably paint. I could embroider. I'm lazy. So I picked this one because it does go nicely against the blue. It does read as gold, and will read even more so once I put some cording and some couching around it. But it gives me a good base to make sure that I have balanced my visual fields and I've put the visual focus where I want it. So those are things that are important when you're putting things together and you're making your decisions. Next thing involving my materials, I plan to use fringe. And when Home Fabrics closed a couple of years ago, I have lots and lots of fringe. So I'm just going to use the commercial fringe. There are lots of other options. You can tie your own fringe. I've done that before. I love hand-tied fringe. It's beautiful. It takes a long time to do, but it's stinking easy. Yes, Home Fabrics closing made me very, very sad. But so the closing, there's lots of different kinds of fringes. There was that one, and because I'm using a thick, this will swing more, but we're not going to pull out the threads right now because it's a lot easier to sew, not having to deal with it all flopping everywhere. But this is a thick fringe and it is a short fringe. Because of that, my plan is to go, I'm going to do the 3 tassels, and I'm going to do the longer center tassel because that's how I like it, the longer center streamer. But I'm going to go all the way around. I'm going to follow the whole pattern all the way around with this. If I was using something like this longer fringe, what I very well might do is just put it on like the V's of the bottoms of the tassel. I'm sorry, the V's of the bottom of the streamer, because you don't need more of this. Or, I might put some across the top if I was doing that sort of thing. I might take some and fold it into little rounds, and then cut that off and it's a tassel on its own. There's lots of different options there. As far as how to, does anyone need to know how to, desperately need to know how to tie a tassel right now? If you do, I can show you. If not, there's lots of options on how to do it online. So tying fringe rather, where it's just, you cut your lengths and you tie an overhand knot, and you do a lot of those and you end up with a really lush fringe. Okay, so I now have a general idea of the fabrics I'm using. I haven't really drawn mine up because I'm using a badge. I don't plan to add like, leaves or crowns or whatever. I'm just gonna do the plain badge. So I'm gonna do the blue sun, blow it up gigantic in the middle of my banner. I'm not planning on decorating the streamers. So again, that's a question you can ask. Do I want to decorate the streamers? What kind of tassels do I want to use? What kind of fringe am I thinking about? And those are important questions to ask, because again, if you're planning on putting a lot of fringe on a banner like this and you're using a lightweight fabric, you're gonna need to interline and interface, because you need it to hold its weight. Because as you remember the picture where we saw it has tabs along the top and it sits on the crossbar, and that'll hold it really quite well, but it'll still collapse a little bit unless your fabric is pretty robust. All right, so we've looked at that. Let's go back to the screen share. Okay, so we talked a little bit about playing with the texture of your fabrics. I mentioned shine and matte because we are dealing with layers coming out. Adding paint and bezants. Those are some things you can consider, like I showed you with like the skull banner. You can do a large piece of applique and then add embroidery or paint, or you can bead the thing if you want to. You can add things that'll shine and sparkle. These are all options that you have, because once again, more is better. Do you want to decorate your streamers? And then the last thing you want to consider, or you could consider it first, but I normally think about it last. I don't know why. Probably because I have now created this giant heavy duty thing, and now I need to figure out how I'm going to hold it up. You can use tabs, so you can do, you can do a loop, you can do a long sleeve that goes along the top that you slide your crossbar into. Those are all options. You can do like 3 tabs, you can do 5, 7. Odds seem to work better because you can start in the center, out, and it's easier to measure, but you can certainly do 4 if you feel like it. Normally, the heavier your banner is, the more tabs or loops you're going to want to have on it, so that it is more supported and it is more evenly supported, so you don't end up with like a droopy center or a droop between the, so it's not folding between the tabs, because that'll happen if your weight is a little bit badly distributed. These aren't huge problems. They aren't huge considerations, but if you want to really, really think it through, these are the sorts of things that you can really, really think through. I'm not that person most of the time. As I previously mentioned, this is the last thing I tend to think about, rather than fully planning, measuring, and making smart decisions. Okay, moving on to applique techniques. Okay, so I am a huge proponent of a period applique. I really am. I think it is easier than regular applique, than what we think of as modern applique. It's less of a bother. I find it's less persnickety. It's a lot of slap layers on and you're done. But there's a variety of different techniques based on culture and materials. And if you want to be super duper into that, I can give you the references and send you on down that rabbit hole. But in general, period applique is cording couched over edges. Those edges are rarely turned under. It is just a raw edge sandwiched between your cording and your fabric. So you've just stitched that under there. Couching over the edges, you can put gilded leather couched over your edges. You can put cording, and we'll talk about that on a future slide. The materials tend to be stabilized a little bit. Leather, wool, heavy silks. They use glue to size the edges, casein glue, rabbit glue, fish glues. You'll see the slips and pre-embroidered shapes. Those will get appliqued. This slide, by the way, is from my regular period applique class, so it's not. I thought it matched better than it does. There's a couple of things we don't really need to worry about today, but it is often used in conjunction with other techniques, and we've talked about that. Okay, so period-wise, I really haven't found heavy satin stitching along the edges, which is what we tend to see in modern applique, especially modern applique done on machine, where you take a really tight zigzag and you go over the edge along the border to stabilize it and to keep it in place, and so that nothing's getting under that sucker. You are welcome to do that. I have not seen examples of that, but from a couple steps back, it doesn't look that much different because it's textural and you get that kind of a ridge and bump from the thread. It doesn't look that much different than a couched than a couched cord along the edge. So I think that's kind of part of where it's coming from, and it's not difficult to do. And it keeps the applique in place. You'll also see that way where you'll see a lot of applique done with like buttonhole stitching along the edge. I do it too. And I think, again, that's coming from because that buttonhole stitch kind of mimics a couched cord, a thicker cording along the edge couched in place. If there are turned under edges of applique, it tends to be on borders. And when I say borders, I mean like long pieces of border, not fiddly shapes. Thin fraying materials are avoided. The pieces themselves tend to be pretty stable. Like I said, with the gonfalons, they tend to be pieces that have been edged with the glue so that it's stable and not going anywhere. They are not frequently heavily sized throughout. So what that means is if I'm going to put a large piece of applique on something, it is really rare that the center of that applique has been stiffened, just the edges. But again, if you want to do it for a different reason, do it. I just want to let you know what I have observed in period applique pieces. But again, this is a functional piece. If you're going to feel so much more comfortable making a gonfalon out of cotton canvas that you have zigzagged on your sewing machine because you're afraid of wind or you're worried it's going to get in the rain, that's a great choice. Go ahead with that choice. Just make sure it's a choice. All right, so stiffening for applique. Hide glue, it works. Hide glue is, well, I have it. Here is some. I don't know if you can see in my tiny little picture of me, but this is hide glue. It comes in crystals. You can buy it for instrument making is where you'll normally see it. Rehydrating this takes it. This bag is going to take me forever to use, honestly. You can also purchase it at the hardware store because Tite Bond is a hide glue. You can just buy it in a bottle and squirt it on things, take a brush, and you have used hide glue. there's other kinds available as well, the fish glue and the things like that. But really, this sort of hide glue, the tight bond, works better for stiffening applique. I have used it some. I took an amazing class from Mistress Alessandra out of Atlantia. She's Meg Vaughn. Her company is Tied to History. She's amazing. She does great work. And I took one of her applique classes a few years ago at, well, not a few years ago, last year at No Real Costume. And she had made a dress that used stiffening, hide glue stiffening, that she had made 10 years ago, and it was still holding up. I took her applique class where we used pieces of fabric that had been treated with hide glue as our stiffening for applique. And if you are interested in that at all, I highly recommend her site here, which is the Della Civetta, and her class handouts on hide glue and its use in 16th century costume. It's fabulous stuff. It works quite well. It is documented quite easily. It's in Cennini, where he talks about, and there is a glue, which is known as leaf glue. This is made out of clippings of goats' muzzles, feet, sinews, and many clippings of skin. This glue is made in March or January during those strong frosts or winds and is boiled with clear water until it's reduced to less than half. Then it's put into certain flat dishes like jelly molds or basins, straining it thoroughly. Let it stand overnight. Then in the morning, cut it with a knife into slices like bread, put it on a mat to dry in the wind, out of the sunlight, and an ideal glue will result. This glue is used by painters, by saddlers, and by ever so many masters, as I show you later on, and it is a good glue for wood and many other things. I don't plan to make my own hide glue. Like I said, I buy it. You can buy it at Home Depot. You can buy it I got my hide glue off Amazon. You can buy it from instrument makers. There's a lot of different options that way. But if you really felt like it, you could totally make it. But it works great. I am currently using it on a bodice and applique on a cloak. And I really like it. I think it's easy to deal with. But modern solutions work just as well. You can do Wonder Under, heat and bond. So, you know, the stuff that comes in rolls that you get at the fabric store, which is just rolls of glue. This one's another brand. This is Seamacine 2. You can buy this, you cut your fabric out, you iron it on one side, you peel off you cut out your applique, you peel off your backing, and you lay it down, and it's done. And it is honestly pretty much the same deal as hide glue. No one is ever going to know. And if you want to have documentation on using those pieces of glue, once again, I refer you to Mistress Alessandra. Glue stick for small details that need to be put in place. I do that from time to time if I have a small bit, and I'm never going to wash it. I'm not worried about it being stable in the future. I just need to get it in place so that it's not shifting around as I stitch it. I will use a glue stick from time to time. Elmer's, tacky, whatever you need to do to get it in place. Obviously, be careful with your velvets. You don't want to, mat it on that. But if you're using a casing glue, you can, dab that off. But I use those because, especially if you're doing a large piece like a banner, it's going to take you a while to stitch it in place. And so you want it to be there, and you would prefer it to not be there with pins poking you constantly. And then how do you put it down? Like I said, if you want to use your sewing machine, more power to you, and you can also couch with your sewing machine. But the period solution for how to keep an applique in place is couching. You can couch with all kinds of things. It's very common to see 2 strands of gold, of a gold metal thread, thin strips of leather, often gilded, finger loop braids. So, you know, just small braids, lots and lots of them. So, twisted cordings, yarn, really, honestly, whatever you feel like using. I can document colors. I can document a lot of metallic is very common just because they like the sparkle. But it doesn't have to be. So whatever you want to put along that edge, again, what you're doing is you're taking your applique and you're sandwiching between, sandwiching the edge between that cording and your fabric. So it's what's going to hold things on. And as you can see, this is what couching is. You lay down your, whatever you're using as your couching, and then you just stitch it in place. It's just basically a little whip stitch. You can make them a little further, a little closer, depending on the stability of your fabric, and also the look you're going for. Here's a few period applique slides. This one is Mamluk, and you can see this very thick cording being used. This piece over here is done with very, very thin strips of gilded leather. It is 14th century French. This one's Italian. I put this one in because you can see the lovely differences in color, where they've used multiple colors. This one is velvet. What?
I don't see anything. Oh, there.
It took me a minute, yeah.
I'm sorry. Is it loading now?
Yeah, it just took a minute.
It took a minute.
All right. So we have the multiple colors in here, which is why I included it so that you can see that even with the edging, they've you know, different colors just for fun to add more to it. You can see this being done with the gold color over there. And I think that is all I got right now. Okay. Yes, wheat starch is also a great stabilizer. I am gluten-free, and so I don't use wheat starch because it tends to get on my hands and make me sick later. Rice starch is nice. I use rice starch. But I did like the hide glue, and again, because I'm using it as a glue in addition to stabilizing, not to stabilizing the fabric, but I'm using it to glue it in place. So if you're using hide glue, one, it'll stabilize it, but then you can get it wet and it'll glue. So it works pretty much identically to the Wonder Under, the Steam a Seam, the whatever it is that you're using, that modern piece that you're using. And I'm using it again to both stabilize and to keep the piece in place while I stitch it. Okay. I have apparently talked for almost an hour. Are there any questions? You're welcome to unmute yourself. I can turn the video off if you'd like. All right, let's turn that off.